living La Vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs, time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage. We're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal. Yeah, you're getting closer, motivated and focused. Don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
Guys, that right there is Mike McCain. He is zerocarb.roofer over here on Instagram. Go check him out. He has lost 110 pounds, but he would be the first to tell you that that's just gravy. The biggest change that happened for him, and the reason he's here today, he was one of those people that when I put out the call, hey, you got a cool story, you got a cool topic, come on my show. You sent me this book, dude, and I was enthralled by it. So thank you for being here today. Really look forward to hearing your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, so guys, if you have dealt with addiction or you know anybody in your life who has dealt with literally any kind of addiction, from sugar addiction to alcohol, drugs, this man right here is about to inspire you. So I just want you to start from the beginning, Mike, of what led you down this path to addiction, and then we'll get into how keto, carnivore came into play and other things. But tell the story.
The best way for me to get started is just to go from the very beginning, Jimmy. And I remember what's really weird is I've done a few of these podcasts now and these lives, but I always thought like maybe it all started around my 3rd and 4th grade years in grade school, the bad eating habits. And there was some traumatic family issues that happened and that sort of thing. But I was going through some old pictures here probably about 3 weeks ago to put an Instagram post up. And I started noticing that it was way younger that I was a heavy kid. Like I was looking back at my kindergarten, my 1st and 2nd grade pictures. So somewhere along the line, I started getting bad eating habits or, doing a lot of emotional eating. I think it just got worse my 3rd or 4th grade year in school with that traumatic family event.
I can so relate to that because I'll look at pictures of myself from like the 1st grade and I was a skinny little kid.
Yeah.
Like I was 6? And then circa 8 years old, 7 or 8, I start seeing a little more weight. And then by 9, 10, I was a fat kid.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, what was going on in my life? Like it makes you retrospect.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't ever pay attention. I just assumed, I didn't assume that everybody had this problem. Well, because forever I tried to figure out why the heck is everybody else thin, skinny. And now the crazy thing is you look at little kids, a lot of them are overweight now. But when I was younger, probably about the same time as you, there wasn't a lot of heavy, kids or whatever. And when I look back at that and think about that now, I just thought it was weird. I just thought, well, maybe it's just the way I am, and my mom being like,
we chalk it up to, well, I guess genetically I'm predisposed to be that way. It's just what it is. And so they do the same thing to diabetes and, well, everybody in my family has diabetes, so I guess I'm going to have it too. And there becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy because you do nothing proactive to turn on the epigenetic expression of those genes. And you just like suffice to, well, I guess all my family's fat, so I'm going to be fat. All my family's diabetic, so I'm going to be diabetic. All my family deals with addiction. I guess I'm going to deal with addiction. So that's kind of a moniker I wish we could change somehow.
Yeah. And again, the thing that blows my mind is looking back at this now and even in the past couple of years, I never connected any of those dots. I never connected the fact that I was a sugar addict. Never connected the dots that I was a sugar addict even before I became a painkiller addict. Like none of it made any sense to me because I didn't understand addiction. And now that I do understand addiction, which, goes back, when I go back to those grade school years, I remember everything I did revolved around eating, right? So it was always playing like, I wonder what we're having for dinner. When I got home from school, my mom always had a treat for us, all those sorts of things. And I got used to just with being big, right? So I started lifting weights in high school, freshman, sophomore years. So I just figured if I'm going to be big, I might as well be strong as well, right? So I'm going to play football. I'm going to do all these things. And so I got big and strong. I became the funny fat kid, So I was fairly popular in high school. Not like super popular, but fairly popular. I was friends with everybody and got along with everybody, but I used my sense of humor, obviously, to cover up a lot of things. but inside I was struggling all the time. You know, I remember, Jimmy, I remember in 7th and 8th grade, my dad ordering Herbalife for us, you know, and saying, we're going to lose weight, Mike, I'll do it with you. We're going to take care of this.
For me, it was the Shackley products. My dad
We did
became
that too.
a fan and a half. He owned restaurants at the time, and he had them have their meetings in his restaurant on Tuesday nights at 7:00.
Yeah.
And they were like, rah, rah, Shackley, rah, rah. And I'm just like,
Yeah, same thing. I remember taking pills for 2 of my meals, like, you know, I don't know, 30, 40 pills for my 2 meals, and then having a sensible in quotes, sensible dinner at night. And I think that lasted 3 or 4 days. My dad made the commitment he's going to do it with me. We're going to get in shape. And I just gagging those pills down was just disgusting. And then eating that meal, after 2 or 3 days, we were both done. And again, I look back at that age now and I think back to it. If somebody would explain to me, you know, and say, hey, Mike, look, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your family besides the fact that you're addicted to food. You're addicted to sugars. We need to figure out why, and we need to figure out how to overcome it.
So, Mike, did you have any kind of traumatic experiences when you were a kid that might have led to kind of the emotional eating? What do you think led to you? Because you even said that you think that's what it was. Like for me, there was turmoil in my house. I was a split family, divorced, and remarried, and all the fun that comes along with that. And so, was there anything like that for you?
Yeah, we had foster brothers and sisters that lived with us, and they all came from one family. And they weren't good kids. You know, one of them stayed with us for long, but the other 2 they were just little hellions, and they would abuse my brother and I, you know, because we were just little kids at the time. I didn't think when you're going through that stuff, which is really weird, you know, when you're going through that kind of stuff, you just look at it like, maybe this is normal or whatever, you know. But now that I look back at it, that's when I started really seeing the patterns of bad eating, emotional eating, hiding feelings with food, good or bad. If I felt good, I would eat. If I felt bad, I would eat, and all of that stuff. So yeah, there was traumatic experiences there, and just a lot of physical.
It was your normal at the time. You didn't know that other kids weren't going through this kind of turmoil. You just assume that. And then when you go through things like that, then it spills over to like school, because I had trouble at home, but then I'd go to school and the kids would pick on me at school. So it's even more trauma added to it. Because I just wonder if that's kind of the missing link behind why people deal with some addiction issues. I was heavily addicted to sugar and well into my adulthood before I figured it out. And it just seems like that's a major trigger nobody talks about.
Yeah. I think about it all the time. And I look back at when I went to school, especially my freshman and sophomore years. I was so depressed. I remember just walking home from school, being incredibly lonely. I had no friends. We had just moved to a new place. The very first day of school, somebody came up to me and said, hey, you look like Pugsley from Addams Family. That's now going to be your nickname, right? It was the very first day of school. And so for that freshman year, especially.
Dumbo for me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And again, you look at it and think, you just kind of laugh it off, you know, okay, well, whatever. But it affects you. When you look back at that now, and I think about the way I felt, the way I thought, the way my mind kind of ran through things, it was devastating, you know. And then what happens is I remember walking home. I remember being really depressed, just walking home and doing nothing for hours. I would just go in my bedroom and do nothing but just lay there and do nothing, which made it worse. And I would eat and then lay there, eat and lay there. And so when I was alone, I would eat, and I would find ways. I would sneak food. I mean, do all the things that an addict does, right? I didn't want anybody to know that I would sneak out in the middle of the night. I would go to the fridge, get something to eat, because I just ate like 4 hours earlier.
And then hide the wrapper. You'd stick it at the bottom of the trash and then put the trash on top of it so nobody knew what you ate.
Yeah, exactly. Or, you know, I would even as an adult, I would think back to times when I would go out to a business lunch, right? So I was in professional sales. I would go to business lunch. I would eat very light because I didn't want to think I was a big eater, right? And then an hour later after that lunch, I would go and get, 2 Big Macs or 2 double Whoppers with cheese. And after I just ate a lunch, already. Or I remember specifically, and I've shared this on the podcast as well, I remember one time eating 2 double Whoppers for lunch, 4 hours later, getting 2-foot-long chicken bacon ranch subs from Subway. And then my wife calls and says, hey, I've got lasagna for us. Just when you
Sure.
get home, we can have some, right? An hour and a half later, I'm eating half the pan of lasagna. Like I couldn't stop myself, and I couldn't understand why. And then every stinking week, every Monday, every weekend I would binge, right? Monday I'm starting, man. Monday I'm starting my diet. It's going to work this time. And by freaking Wednesday, I was binging again. I just couldn't stop.
There's where I was going to go. Is I remember a time when I was in college where I would have moments of, Jimmy, what are you doing? I'd have like a pastry or something in my hand that I got out of the vending machine, and I'm eating the honey bun, whatever it was, and I had eaten like a bite or two, and I'm just like, it doesn't even taste good. I should just throw it away. And you have like that moment of consciousness. I throw it away, and as I walk away, in my mind, I go, well, I can't waste that. That's food. There's a starving kid in Africa. So I go back to that garbage can, pull that nasty garbage out, and get the honey bun, and I start eating it again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it just reminds me so much like growing up, and even as a little kid, mom, like make sure you finish everything on your plate. And it was I remember even gagging on like Brussels sprouts and broccoli and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So carnivore worked out awesome for me, right? Because I never liked the vegetables or whatever.
Although
my mom would always make me eat it.
Psychologically forcing us to eat these things that we didn't want actually made us not want them even more. That's the kind of psychology of it. If you think about it, you have to eat the rest of those Brussels sprouts or you can't leave the table. And it's like, you have a negative view now of that thing that's supposed to be pretty healthy for you. But yes, thankfully we eat carnivore and we don't worry about Brussels sprouts and broccoli.
Well, I actually ended up starting to like Brussels sprouts and and zucchini and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of miss it a little bit. And really, and we'll come back to the addiction part, but the only reason why I kind of stay away from it now is because I notice that if I eat those things, that my eczema on my, my face and my head actually kind of show up. I'm bald, right? So, I mean, it's easy to see that flaky skin and the redness in my face and on my head. And so otherwise I'd probably be eating those and eat more keto, but I just don't do it. But yeah, the addiction, and a weird thing, Jimmy, is I never understood that I had an addiction or sugar addiction until probably about 2 years ago, really about a year ago. And it all started transpiring when I was 36 years old. So I've established the fact, obviously, that I was a food addict, at a young age. I struggled with weight. Actually, when I was a senior in high school, I ended up, I remember looking in the mirror one day. It was about January, Christmas time of my senior year. And I looked in the mirror and I was naked. Just got out of the shower. And I remember looking at myself going, man, Mike, you are fat, right? Yeah. And no wonder no girls like you. I mean, that's seriously what was in my head, right? And my mom, of course, she would always try to protect me and say, you're not fat, Mike. You're just big boned. It's the way it is, right? And but I remember thinking when I looked at her like, man, you are fat.
Yes.
We got to do something about this, right? So something in my mind, that mindset that just clicked or whatever.
Mom will always coddle you and lie to your face.
Oh yeah, and I love her dearly, and she still does it to this day.
Yeah, so, mine does too. Mine does too. When I started my little 100-day sabbatical thing that I'm currently in the midst of, she's like, "You're gonna push yourself too hard." I'm like, "Mama, I'm a grown-ass man. I can figure this out." Thank you.
Yeah. She does that to me all the time. Are you sure you should just be eating all meat, whatever? Even though I've lost 120 pounds, my cholesterol's gone down, all that stuff. I get it. I understand. She's my mom and she loves me and she wants to take care of me and stuff. And no matter how old I get, I'm almost 50 years old and she still wants to take care of me. I understand it now that I have grown kids and have grandkids and stuff now too. You still want to take care of your kids. Yeah. But I started losing weight. I did lose 100 pounds at my senior year. I got really in a lot of shape, but the thing that is weird to me when I think about that, or I got in good shape, was that I never faced my addiction, right? I never faced my sugar addiction or my food addiction. I ate healthy, which I thought was healthy, right? So I'd eat clean. I'd eat lots of chicken breast, tuna, ate a lot of, fat-free pasta, like all that kind of stuff. But I got to the point when I was lifting, and I was, running. I would run for an hour a day. I would lift for an hour a day. So I had a lot of time to work out. And I got down to like 165 pounds. But I was eating, Jimmy, this is crazy. Like I think back at this now, I was eating 8,000 calories a day. I would eat I would eat every 3 hours. So I'd wake up right away in the morning. I would eat like 2 or 3 baked potatoes, right? And then 3 hours after that, I would eat maybe 3 or 4 cans of tuna with 0 fat, like no animal fat whatsoever. Everything was low fat. Everything I would eat again.
Real Good Foods is one of the fastest growing frozen food companies in the U.S. Everything they make is nutrient dense, high in protein, low in carbs, and made from real food ingredients. They make food for every occasion: breakfast sandwiches, poppers, enchiladas, entrees, and pizza. So whether you're on a keto diet, trying to cut back on your carbs, or just trying to eat healthier, they make super convenient and tasty options. RealGoodFoods.com and at Real Good Foods on social media.
Let me paint the picture for some people, because 8,000 calories of a mixed diet of all 3 macronutrients, really, it's big, but it's not as big as the primary source of your calories coming from protein and carbohydrate with very little fat. Fat has 9 calories per gram, protein and carb only 4, which meant you were eating a shitload of food.
Oh yeah, I would eat for my carbohydrate meals. A lot of times I would eat a 1-pound bag of macaroni with fat-free paste pecane sauce. So I would just eat the whole thing. But I was exercising like a freak, right? Well, it was perfect for me as a food addict because I was eating a lot of food. But I was also exercising and working out quite a bit. And so after I stopped working out, I kept the weight off for about 4 years. Met my wife. I have a beautiful family. I have a beautiful wife. There's no way that she would have married me had I weighed 300 pounds. I could tell you that. So I found her. We started dating. We got married. And about probably within 3 months after we got married, I wasn't working out. I wasn't doing anything, man. The weight just started coming back on. And those eating habits got worse. So as stresses happened, as emotional stuff happened, I would find the solace again, really, in eating. And it didn't take me very long to get back up to 300 pounds.
Yeah.
And so I ended up actually probably about early 2000s, end of 1990s. I found Atkins, so I decided I was going to do Atkins. But I had been so brainwashed, right? Going back to that, eating no-fat tuna and no-fat chicken breast, things like that. I've been so brainwashed to know or to think that red meat's bad for you, shouldn't eat saturated fats. So when I did Atkins, I was eating chicken breast, turkey breast, ham. I mean, it was not sustaining me, right? So after 3 weeks of doing Atkins, I lost like 30 pounds, but I was freaking starving all the time. Like I could not stop myself from eating then. So I just ended up binging again and just like, well, Atkins isn't for me.
Let me ask you about your Atkins diet. Did you also consciously, along with the carbohydrate restriction, also restrict fat because you knew that was healthy? Did that play a role?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I looked at. Like I wasn't going to eat saturated fats. So I did Atkins completely wrong, right? Because I was going to have heart disease.
And I even talked to his widow, Veronica, after he died. She came on one of the events I was leading, and I got to talk to her, and she said, "Oh yeah, Bobby always loved having the fat and protein in like steak." Like that was his ideal of people when he told them, eat unlimited fat and protein. He literally meant have fat and protein in their natural form. Chicken breast is not a natural form. Yeah. And because we've been so indoctrinated with the low fat message, people opted for chicken breast and broccoli, breast and Brussels sprouts or whatever. Yeah. And that's why they didn't do well. So people say, I tried the Atkins diet and I was hungry all the time. I'm like, you didn't do it right.
Yeah. Well, and you think about, right, like how I lost weight the first time, which was eating super low fat,
yes,
very high carb, very high carb. And I came from the era. Do you remember Susan Powder? Do you remember her?
Yeah.
So like that was the era that I came from, which was saturated fats are bad for you. Eat low fat, high carb, and everything's going to be fine. Man, I look back at that now and how disastrous that was, because I was eating like very minimal nutrient dense foods, and I was just keeping my sugar addiction alive. And I look back at now, it kind of makes me angry a little bit that I fed into that whole deal.
And here's the thing too, you can keep your sugar addiction alive not eating sugar.
Yeah.
Something that blows people's minds. And for many years I've had guests on here, even researchers, that say, oh, it's just sugar that's the issue. And I'm like, well, what about the sugar metabolically? And I remember one of them I had on Dr. Richard Johnson. He thought fructose was the only thing that caused obesity and chronic diabetes. And so I challenged him on it. And he's a major researcher. And I said, Richard, I think you need to look at the role that all carbohydrates play in the body. Once they're metabolized, they become just as bad as that dastardly fructose. And do you know he changed his mind? And now he credits me in his books for making him think differently. But most people, they don't go there. They assume, well, I cut out the sugar. I'm not eating anything sweet on the tongue. Therefore, I'm good. And that's where they fall into trouble.
Oh, I still have to be super careful. Like I don't do a lot of keto treats or anything like that because of even the sugar alcohols and stuff. But even if I drink, my favorite drink is Diet Squirt. I don't know why, I just love Diet Squirt.
Oh, Diet Squirt. I was like, what?
But I have to be really careful if I drink it because it'll trigger cravings for me within an hour of drinking that. It took me probably 6 months after I started carnivore to really figure that out. Like, oh my gosh, I can't really even drink Diet Pop anymore with anything, anything like that.
What is the sweetener in Diet Squirt?
That's aspartame.
Just aspartame, or do they also put ACE-K?
They might. I don't know. I just noticed aspartame.
So it says aspartame, which I call nasty tame.
Yeah.
They usually combine it, like they do in the Coke Zero and different ones, with acesulfame potassium. If that's an ingredient on the list, that's called ACE-K. ACE-K is a known increaser of insulin. And so if you increase your insulin, that's why you would be hungry after having it.
Well, it took me, like I said, a while to catch on to going, oh my gosh, why am I craving something? I just ate 2 pounds of steak, right? I just ate 2 pounds of meat and I'm hungry like an hour later. There's no way that's physically possible. There's no way.
On lots of hormones that make you hungry.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And people are like, well, 0 calories. I'm like, yeah, but between the carbonation, between the caffeine, which has an insulinogenic effect in some people, and most certainly that combination of the nasty tame and the ACE-K, it's a recipe for why you may not be getting unaddicted. I think it keeps the addiction going.
Yeah. Yeah. So I stopped drinking it, right, for probably about another year. I do drink it now, but the most I've ever drank in a day is just 2 cans of it. I can't go over 2 cans because it'll just do different things. But I've gone long enough now that I can control that craving, right? That I understand that. And but man, it was tough in the beginning. There were so many things that I had to learn just by accident. Really, this is the crazy thing, Jimmy. And we'll go back to the how I got onto the painkillers or whatever, right? Because I didn't fix my sugar addiction by dieting, right? That very first time, I kept eating crappy foods, and then it caught up with me, and then it just emotionally became so bad, especially with my job. It was super stressful. It seemed like almost every year at the end of the year, which was the busiest time of the year for us, I would gain 20 to 30 pounds every year, like at the end of every year, just like clockwork for almost 8 years in a row. And
some of that was necessarily the foods you ate. You could have eaten the same foods but not had stress and been okay. But I think stress, I often kind of remind people stressed, spelled backwards, is desserts. So it's like you're eating lots of desserts when you have stressed your body. Look at it, actually spells desserts. It's amazing because people that they don't know how to de-stress, which is why meditation, physical exercise, getting out for a walk, all of these things are helpful in lowering that stress load, but we're not taught how to do that.
Yeah. Well, and it goes, I just keep going back to the last 3 years. What I've learned is I've really had to figure out if I was truly hungry or if I was eating because of emotions, or, that was stuff that I did naturally on carnivore, which blows my mind because when I think back at that now, I just started carnivore mainly because I wanted pain relief. I wanted my inflammation to go down because my back and my shoulders hurt so bad. That goes back to the addiction to painkillers as well. But the thing that was crazy to me is that I started to figure out just by going carnivore why I was eating. And that's what led me to the fact that, oh my gosh, I've been freaking addicted to sugar since I was a little kid. Yeah. And I didn't understand that. But going carnivore and basically just eating when my body was telling me to eat made me realize how bad of an emotional eater I was, how bad of a binge eater I was. Yeah. Just, whether things were going good or things were going bad. And it really blows my mind to think back to.
And look, I think sugar is the gateway to all the other addictions. If you have a major addiction that's not food related today, look back. I bet you had a sugar first.
Yeah, well, that's really what got me onto the sugar food addiction was that the Bitten Johnson, who I heard an interview with her in Carnivore Yogi, and on that she was talking about. She goes, "I bet you, right, that she's obviously not talking to me, but talking to everybody in the audience, saying, I bet you that before you became an alcoholic, you were a sugar addict. Before you became a painkiller addict, you were a sugar addict.
Yes.
All those things, right? Before you became a heroin addict, you were a sugar addict."
And even like a workaholic addict or a sex addict or other kind of non-nutrition and non-substances, anything that's an addictive thing, it started in the brain because you got a reward center
Yep.
enforcement from eating sugar.
Yep. It started that dopamine response, and then you're starting to chase that dopamine.
Yes.
That was mind-boggling to me, or eye-opening as well, whatever you want to call it. It blew me away because I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's when I started looking back on my whole life going, all right, I need to know, when did those patterns start? Why did the patterns start? How did the emotional eating start? Where did the binge eating really start? And all this stuff. And it's opened my eyes quite a bit. And I never even drank caffeine or anything till probably was 29 years old. Never touched it, never smoked, never drank, never did anything like that. But it was when I was 36 years old, is when I hurt my back doing a CrossFit workout. It's one of those times again, like, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do it. This is nuts. One of my hundreds of diets starting on, those Monday mornings. And I was doing one of the workouts and I really hurt myself this time. Like, I had power lifted since I was probably in 7th grade, and I enjoyed powerlifting and lifting heavy weights and that sort of thing. But this workout just crushed me. Like, I was doing some hang cleans with 60 pounds. And it was my last rep. And the whole point of the exercise, right, especially in CrossFit, is to do it as fast as you can. So I do 20 hang cleans with 80 pounds. I would run a mile or run one lap on the treadmill as fast as I could at 400, basically. Then I would do the 20 hang cleans again with 80 pounds. You do that like 3 or 4 times as fast as you can. It was my last set, my last rep, and I snapped the weight up. And man, I felt it in my back. Like it dropped me to my knees. I thought I actually got a hernia, which I've had a hernia before because the pain was so bad in the front of my stomach area. I just laid there for probably about 10 minutes before I could finally move. I've been obviously watching your post the last couple of weeks about your back, so you know that feeling, right? Yeah, usually my back pain had gone away though, right? It had always gone away. This one never did. And I was living with it for about 3 or 4 months. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't do anything. And it just got to me to where I went to the doctor and I said, look, you got to help me. I need something for the pain. I just want to sleep. So he prescribed some hydrocodones to me. And I got home that night and he prescribed one, take one every 4 hours, whatever. But I took 2 because I wanted to just relax, get a good night's sleep. 2 of them didn't do anything for me, right? So the next night I was kind of mad because I just wanted to sleep, like I said. So I took 4 of those pills. And they were just little 5 milligram pills, right? So I took 20 milligrams. And I slept amazingly, like just like a baby. So I was like, all right, man, I found the formula, right? So they didn't take me very long, though, to find that, wow, if I feel this good when I'm sleeping, what's it going to feel like when I'm awake, right? So I started chasing that buzz during the day. And it didn't take very long for those to go to 10 milligrams, then up to Percocets, fentanyl, or whatever. It just did not take long at all.
Did you ever do oxycodone at some point?
I did do oxycodone, but the time release in there, like my body wouldn't like digest it very well. And so
I always got more of a buzz, I guess, for lack of a better term, from hydrocodone than I ever did oxycodone.
Yeah, I didn't. I took
oxy is supposed to be the stronger drug, but Vicodin, I guess, is what they call hydrocodone. Always gave me that kind of, okay. I couldn't imagine doing a podcast on hydrocodone. I'd be like, hey guys.
So what I learned in rehab was that kind of like a highly functioning alcoholic, right, who can drink all the time basically and carry on conversations that nobody knows besides the smell on them probably that they're drinking or whatever. I was a very highly functioning addict. And I was doing, at this time I would do like tax seminars to accountants. Like I would do 3 or 4 hour tax seminars. I could take 6 Percocets at one time, Jimmy, and get up and talk tax law for like 3 or 4 hours.
You learned how to ride the wave of the high.
Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy. I look back at that now and just think that how crazy that really is. But here's what really blew my mind when I really came to understand addiction is when I was in rehab. This was in 2014. I was in rehab at Valley Hope here in O'Neill. And I remember them talking about people who come from lines, right? So like you look at your parents on both sides as far as addiction is concerned. That can even be sugar addiction. It doesn't matter. Food addiction, sugar addiction. So if you have addicts or alcoholics on one side of your family, so like let's say it's on your mother's side. This just blew me away when I learned this. So let's say it's on your mother's side. You have a 5 out of 10 chance that you will be an addict as well, right? If you have alcoholics or addicts on both sides, like on your father's side, in my case, for example, if you have it on both sides of your family, you have basically a 90 to 100% chance that you will be an addict. And I started thinking back then going, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever saw any of my dad's brothers without a beer in their hand, ever, when I was around them, right? So they were alcoholics. My mom, my grandfather on my mom's side, and my great uncle were all alcoholics. So I was doomed. And that's why, like I look back at that now, and that's why when I took those first 2 pain pills, they didn't do anything for me. Like I could feel it. I had just a propensity, right? Just the way that my genetics were, that I really had to go crazy on that, to feel it.
Keto Chow is a customizable shake mix that is also perfect for cooking and baking, giving you simple, nutritionally perfect meal options. Keto Chow. Make keto easy. Discover your favorite flavor at jimmylovesketochow.com.
Well, and we live in an escape society right now, Mike, where people, I just need to take the edge off. It's too much to handle, and especially everything happening in the world right now. We all could use one, but like you have to find other ways of managing, which is what you learned in your rehab experience. So tell us the culmination of how many Percocet and all that were you taking before you realized, holy crap, this is out of control?
The most pills I took in a day, which were the hydrocodones or the Percocets, was 22 pills. Ooh. And I thought I was managing managing it well at the time.
Wow.
The doctor put me on, I was on fentanyl for a little bit, so I was on those patches. And I hated the fentanyl, man, Jimmy. I get serious anxiety. Like, it felt like if I would open up, especially at night, if I would open up my curtains, I would see demons like flying around. I was like crazy anxiety wise with the fentanyl. So after 3 weeks, I basically just told my doctor, I was like, I don't want fentanyl anymore. It just does weird things to me. The one that I used the most though was methadone. I was on methadone for 5 years, and I was taking up to 8 pills or 8 to 10 pills a day of that methadone. They seemed to work the best because it didn't give me a buzz like hydrocodone, but it was long lasting.
Well, it's kind of like any addiction. You start off and you get a buzz at a lower level, but at some point you need a little more and a little more and a little more. Let me tell you one quick story about hydrocodone. This is when I was writing Cholesterol Clarity. I was trying to show that if you clean up a lot of your mouth stuff, the heavy metals and infections, then you can see your blood cholesterol drop, and it did. But in here, I told a story about that. What I didn't tell is, midst of the recovery from all that surgery in my mouth, I was in a lot of pain. He's like, you're going to be in a little bit of pain. So he gave me a little script for hydrocodone. I think it was like 8 pills. And so I was in a lot of pain. And within like a very short period of time, I'm like, dude, I need some more of that hydrocodone. And I was also cognizant that's a highly addictive drug. So you're going to really control it, and they'll keep track of my name. You had to sign for it at the pharmacy because they keep track of like how many pills you have so they don't give you too many. And so I ended up, Mike, taking 72 in the course of a week because I was in such writhing pain. You know what it was? They left a little piece of tooth and it was hitting a nerve. As soon as he pulled that little piece of tooth out, all the pain vanished. I'm sitting there thinking, man, you put my lip through hell and back, and thank God I never got addicted to the hydrocodone. 72 in a week's not so bad.
That's a lot, man. I think back to that, the pills that I took and the amount of pills I took. And when I look back at the methadone, taking even 10 to 12 of those a day or whatever, when I finally checked myself into rehab, Jimmy, this is the crazy thing too, and this is a whole nother podcast in itself. But before I checked myself into rehab, I had lost everything, right? So financially, I had my own company. I was getting sued by a competitor that didn't want competition. We lost our house. I won the court case with a lawsuit from being sued by a competitor, but I lost everything financially. I had $500,000 in legal fees I had to pay out. Lost about $4 million over the course of 3 or 4 years. And so to my wife and to my family, to my friends, it was all like, this all happened to Mike because he's high on painkillers all the time, you know, and man, that was very difficult to live with. But the crazy thing is that when I did go to rehab, I went to rehab out of spite because I was so tired of people nagging me, you know, like, Mike, you got to go to rehab. Mike, you got to go to rehab. My family had set me down multiple times, and, you know, my kids were little at the time. You know, I think my oldest at the time was like 14 or 15. And they would sit me down to do an intervention, but they couldn't get it out. So they would say things like, well, Dad, what's your plans for the future? You know, and that kind of stuff. Rather than say, we love you, we want you to go to rehab, we're worried about you. And finally, my wife basically told me I couldn't come back in the house unless I went to rehab. So I was like, fine, whatever, I'll go to rehab. This is so stupid. And so I went to rehab. And this is what was crazy. And this is the thing that bothered me the most in there. Because you mentioned this a few minutes ago, we talked about, I found something else to deal with the addiction. It
Yes.
took me a long time to find something else, because when I was in rehab, I would ask my counselor and I would ask my doctor, I would say, you know, this is great that I'm getting off the painkillers, but what do I do for the pain? Right? Because it's not going to go away. I still have the degenerative disc disease. I still have the joint pain in my shoulders. What do I do for the pain? And the answers were all the same, which was, you know, I don't know, Mike, you're just going to have to figure that out. They'd be like, I'd be so angry. Like, angry at the world. I was angry at my family. I was angry at my friends. I was angry at everybody else who made me go to rehab. I was angry at the doctors. Like, what the frick, man? How the heck am I going to exist, you know, with living with this pain? There was a reason why I was taking it.
So did you live in a state, or do you live in a state where like medical marijuana would be an option possibly to help?
Nebraska, incredibly conservative, right?
Well, I live in South Carolina. Welcome to the.
Yes, no, that was an issue, but and so none of it was even brought up. There was nothing brought up besides the fact that maybe try meditation or hypnosis.
Yeah,
like that just didn't make any sense. And so I was miserable for 2 reasons. I was miserable when I got out of rehab. First of all, because of the pain. Secondly, that pain didn't do anything to help my depression or my rage that I had against the world. Man, I freaking hated the world, Jimmy. Hated it. And I share this all the time too. Like, I remember I would see the biggest dude and I would say, man, just try something because I want to beat the crap out of you. I don't even care if I lose. I just want to beat the crap out of somebody, something. I'm so full of rage. I look back at that now and I can't even comprehend that feeling, you know, of having that. I lived with that for 3 freaking years, man. I lived with the pain. I lived in the misery. I couldn't sleep at night. I would come home from work because I lost my company, because I lost everything. I was working at a car dealership selling cars, which I hated doing. I hated the manipulation side of it. You know, it made it even worse. I just felt dirty with selling cars. And I was in so much pain. I just was so full of rage. I would come home. I would grab some Benadryl. I'd take 3 or 4 Benadryls, go to sleep, and I just wanted to escape from everything. And I couldn't take narcotics anymore. I couldn't do anything. I was just miserable. I was so desperate to find relief from pain. Now, at this time, I was 300 pounds, right? So I knew deep down, right? I knew deep down that if I lost at least 100 pounds, that would take the pressure off my back and off my joints. So I was like, I got to get serious about losing weight. I can't live in this misery for the next 40 years. Like, that's the thing, that I was okay with dying. That blows me away to think about. Like, I was seriously okay with I didn't want to end my life. I didn't want to commit suicide, but I was really okay if God would take me. I was okay with that. I was like, you know what? If you want to take me, I'm totally cool with this now, God. But I didn't want to die. I didn't want to kill myself, but I was okay with dying. And so I came across intermittent fasting. Right. So I was like, shoot, I can try to do that. Right. I did this. I still didn't understand I was an addict. So it's like, I can do intermittent fasting. I will try that. So I did the 16-hour fast, 8-hour window of eating. But I did set some really hard fast rules, right? Like, there's no way I'm eating after 6 o'clock at night. And I can eat once it turns 12:01 p.m. Right. So I had that, I guess in this case, it was a 6-hour window.
Right.
That was very difficult for the first 3 weeks, especially if you're a food addict, right? Trying to control yourself and not eat during that window. And there were times when I was working late that I would get home at 6:10, and I'm like, oh man, I'm so stinking hungry, but I didn't stop to get something to eat. I tried to make it home in time and didn't, but I stuck with it, man. I was like, no, I'm not going to eat. It's 6:01. I'm not going to eat. So I made it to the next day. So it kept getting easier and easier. And this is the craziest thing that happened. I lost probably about 30 pounds just doing intermittent fasting, just eating that way. I started fasting longer and longer, right? Because the fast started getting easier to do. But I started noticing after I'd make it about 24 or 25 hours that my pain would be very minimal in my back and my shoulders.
Yes.
But then I would eat, right? So I would eat like a pizza. I would eat a large pizza or whatever, right? Because I'm not fixing my binge eating. I'm just binge eating in a smaller window now. I would eat, and 2 hours later, I'd be freaking miserable again. My joints would hurt, my back would hurt. And so it took me a while to catch on and go, wait a minute, I feel horrible when I eat. Like, what the heck is causing this? So I started Googling, do certain foods cause inflammation? That's when I came across keto, right? So you try to eat a diet that's not inflammatory. So, and I always thought keto was extreme, right? Because eating red meat, even though I was eating just crappy food, I was still like, I can't eat red meat. I can't eat highly fatty food because I'll have heart disease. So that was a big brain thing for me to overcome, was to say, well, keto might not be that bad.
Yes.
So I tried keto, right? And I look back at it now. The only reason why I don't do keto stuff now, right? Like I said, because the keto treats cause cravings, cause me to binge, but because of the eczema now with it. But I would eat like fatty meat, whatever, which I felt incredibly guilty for doing at first. But I would eat, like I knew I could have 20 grams of carbs, right? So I'd have a piece of bread. So I'd eat a piece of bread. Think about how stupid that is, right? Especially if you're a carb addict or a sugar addict.
Yeah, but in your mind, you're saying, well, I'm allowed 20 grams and I love bread. It's allowable, and not realizing it's not just about the carb counts. It's about the quality of the ingredients. And so that enriched whole wheat flour is not doing you any good.
Yep. Yeah. So I would eat a piece of bread, and then I'd be just extremely hungry, like an hour, 2 hours later. So I'd go, nope, I got to stick to this. I got to do it. I'm going to lose the weight. I'd go another 2 days. I just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And then by the 4th or 5th day on keto, I would end up just binging. I just go on a massive bender. I couldn't stop myself. I would eat anything and everything I could for 2 or 3 days. And I go, oh, crap, I got to do keto again. I'll start on Monday. Then I would just feel miserable again, right? The joint pain and stuff. And that's about the time, somehow I came across, I was still doing intermittent fasting by this time, but that's about the time I came across the Joe Rogan, Sean Baker podcast. That took me about 2 months to mentally overcome that thing, listening to this guy talk about how in the heck he's eating just nothing but ribeyes, right? Is he freaking eating nothing but ribeyes and he feels amazing? I'm like, man, he's going to die of heart disease. He's going to like, because I already felt guilty because I was eating keto, right? Well, it sounded even more extreme. But I just kept researching it. I kept reading stories. I kept reading, listening to podcasts with like Kelly Hogan and Carnivore Yogi and all these other ones going, talking about how amazing they feel. And so I'm like, man, I'm just going to freaking try it. So it took me another 2 or 3 months of watching videos and listening to things that I'm going to try it, right? I'm sick and tired of being miserable. And I knew, right, that when I fasted for a long period of time that I didn't have the pain. So I'm like, maybe they're onto something.
Yes.
And so I just decided, it was the birth of my little granddaughter, my first grandbaby, September 24th of 2018. So I'm coming up on my 3-year mark here. And I decided I was going to do carnivore, just decided that day I was going to do it. And it changed my life. And within probably 2 or 3 days, my pain in my shoulders, my joints in my shoulders and my back went down tremendously.
Yes.
Like, it was unbelievable, like how much it went down. So that alone was enough to keep me going, right? Even so, fighting through the sugar cravings and the withdrawals and all that stuff, the pain relief was enough that, you know what, no, I'm not having some sugar, man, because I'm just going to keep going with this. Within 3 weeks, this is probably the thing that probably sealed everything for me. It was kind of, I don't know if you want to call it, testimony sealing experience for me. About 3 weeks to the day after I started, I was driving up to do a roof up in northern Nebraska, and I kept having these feelings. And I know it doesn't make any sense, and maybe it makes sense to you, but you're talking about like keto clarity and all these other kinds of things, right? But as I was driving up there, I kept having these waves of euphoria coming over me, And I knew that I was depressed, right? I knew that the narcotic use over 8 years had destroyed my testosterone levels, my hormone levels, everything else, and caused the depression and everything. But I didn't realize how bad it was just because of how it sneaks up on you. And so these waves of euphoria kept coming. Like, it was so drastic to me, and the disparity from the darkness was so much to the effect that I kept thinking, like, just freaking, it feels like I took a painkiller. What the heck? I'm trying to think in my mind, did I take something that I shouldn't have? It was that drastic.
You tired of playing the mask game? Me too. That's why I wanted to tell you about the Unmask. This is a breathable, completely breathable. It covers, you can't even see that it's breathable, but it's breathable. Whether you're going on a plane, having to go into a store and wearing this thing, playthemaskgame.com is how you can get this mask. They come in all kinds of colors and everything. In fact, right there, you can see right through it what it is, but when you're wearing it, it does not look like it's anything different, but it's breathable, baby. Playthemaskgame.com.
I have heard people describe that, Mike, as the carnivore zen. When it kicks in, you just feel this, this kind of
happened.
euphoria.
That euphoria came for 3 days, Jimmy. 3 days it just kept coming in waves. And I was like, what? It was like the most amazing buzz I've ever had, more than I've ever had with the painkillers or whatever. It blew me away. And what I remember was actually Dr. Baker talking about that, like how inflammation affects the brain for depression, for anxiety and stress, and all this other kinds of stuff. And I was like, there's no freaking way. Is that real?
Were you hearing Gregorian chants in the background?
I thought, like, I was like, I can die now, man. My life is like that. Then it was unbelievable how I felt.
Yeah,
it's very hard to describe to people, that feeling, because if I had not taken painkillers and experienced that type of euphoria, yes, I don't know if I would have noticed it. But what I realized is that this is how normal people feel, and I'm feeling normal again. And the reason why it let up after 3 days is because my brain was used to feeling it by that time.
Yes,
right? And so,
but look. The more you challenge yourself, and I know you do this now. And by the way, I love on your Instagram page, which again, guys, go follow him, zerocarb.roofer. On there, you do videos, and I love how you come on. Hey guys, it's Mike, and I'm an addict. Like, you still identify as that addict because there, but for the grace of God and carnivore, you would still be in that addictive kind of mindset. And so reminding yourself of it often, I love that you do that.
I had an experience earlier this year in March that my appendix ruptured. And it took me a while, probably about 3 days to go to the doctor, and went to the emergency room on a Sunday afternoon. And I was pretty lucky, Jimmy. There's a reason why I'm telling you this story. But when I got in there, the emergency room doctor, my white blood count was almost 40, and my C-reactive protein, my inflammation was like almost 20. Like, it was way up there. He kept trying to give me shots in the emergency room. Like, man, we need to do something for the pain. I'm like, no, I'm okay. I've lived with this for 3 days. I'm okay. And plus, I told him I was a painkiller addict. I'm afraid to take this. And he's like, yeah, but the pain's going to get worse. And so I was in there for an hour and a half before he gave me the shot of fentanyl. And they gave me Dilaudid, and so I could push that button every three times every 10 minutes or something like that. But I only pushed it 3 times an hour. Like, I was super strict. Like, no, I'm not going to give in to this. I had family members that were calling my wife saying, he's going to get addicted again. He's going to relapse and all this other kind of stuff. I firmly 100% believe, without a doubt, that because I wasn't a sugar addict anymore,
yes,
that I wasn't jonesing for that pain.
Yes.
When I got out of the hospital 5 days later.
Yes.
It was very easy. Like, it wasn't triggering those dopamine sensors or those thoughts or whatever.
Nutrition was naturally lowering your inflammation. There wasn't that exasperation of the pain as well.
Yeah. That was mind-blowing to me as well. But within probably the last years, when I really started understanding I was an addict, and I believe, just like in that video that I posted the other day, I 100% believe that had I not come to that fact that I was an addict, right? So even when I went into rehab, that very first time that I had to stand up and say, hey, my name's Mike, I'm an addict, I hated saying it, like, with a passion. Like, because I'm sitting there going, I might be an addict, but I'm taking the painkillers for a reason. I'm in pain. So I might be an addict, but I mean, I hated saying it.
Because there is such a stigma attached
Yeah.
to yourself, a drug addict, an alcohol addict, whatever. The one there's not a real big stigma on is sugar addict. And
Yeah.
it should have the biggest stigma of all.
Right. So that's why I'm saying it so much now on my Instagram, is that I'm an addict. You're an addict if you can't put food away and you can't put it down, and it consumes every freaking second of your day. You're thinking about your next meal, that next hit that you want to have. You are an addict, and you have to realize that fact. And once you internalize the fact that you are an addict, I really firmly believe mentally that you start to formulate those tools in your mind that help you overcome that addiction.
So I was invited to be on The Doctors. This is about 3 or 4 years ago, and the producer called, "Hey, are you Jimmy Moore yet? And we're looking for a guest for tomorrow that will talk about addiction. And we need you to say that food isn't addictive." I'm like, "It is." But it is. And they're like, "Oh, we thought you didn't believe it." I'm like, "You need to look at my podcast and my posts a little closer, because I'm all about the addictive properties of sugar." And so they were trying to get somebody that would claim that there isn't one. Even a lot in the medical community, they still don't recognize the addictive properties of especially carbohydrates and sugars. They don't recognize it, which I think is so inane. Like, how do you not see the connection? Well, part of the reason why medical doctors don't see it is they don't have training in it. And so they don't know how to recognize, oh, this person has hyperglycemia, this person has hyperinsulinemia. Let's look at their diet and see what's causing that.
Yeah. And that, again, the more I keep diving into this, which this works so well for me, and I feel so amazing that really nobody can come back and say, "Brian, why don't you just have a little bit of rice? Why don't you just have a little?" And first of all, I can't, because the inflammation that it causes instantly,
Yes,
not only in my body, but in my freaking brain.
Yeah.
Like, I have to share this, like, about 3 months into this, so this would have been January 2019, and I've shared this on many podcasts as well. It's almost as pronounced to me as that feeling of euphoria was, and the reason why I bring it up, it sounds so corny to talk about, and that's the fact that I remember about 3 months into this, I was feeling really good. My daughter had some cranberry juice in the fridge, right? And I love cranberry juice. And so I was like, I'm going to try some. I'm just going to drink a half a cup of it to see what it does. So I drank a half a cup of it, an hour went by, and I didn't feel anything. So I'm like, oh, maybe I'm full of crap. Maybe this isn't really like what I think it is. But 2 hours later, man, and this is what I think is so crazy about food addiction or sugar addiction. 2 hours later, I get this paralyzing anxiety. Like, I'm standing in the kitchen and I start thinking, oh my gosh, I got to pay this bill. Oh my gosh, what about this? Oh crap, what if this roof leaks? We didn't do a job. Like, it just came over me. Like, I couldn't even move. I just stood there in the kitchen. And my wife noticed it, and she comes in, and I had already, think about this, I hadn't had sugar on purpose in 3 months, right? If I did, I'm like thinking maybe it's like maybe a piece of beef jerky or something, right? But I hadn't had sugar on purpose in 3 months. I had already freaking forgot that I drank that cranberry juice 2 hours earlier, right? So I'm just going, I don't know. She asked me what was wrong. She said, "Mike, what's wrong with you?" I said, "I don't know. I just have this paralyzing anxiety that came over me." And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way that could be the cranberry juice, right? And so I wanted to make sure that what was happening to me was real and that I'm not imagining things. So what I did is the next morning, I let it all clear out of my system, right? So about 3 or 4 hours later, I felt I had that zen back again.
Yes.
So that next morning, I decided I'm going to try another half a cup of that. And I did it, and same thing. 2 hours later, just paralyzing anxiety. But I knew what it was this time, right? So I'm like, okay, I just got to write it out. Freaking get him. Evidently, the way my body metabolizes sugars and what it does with my inflammation, I cannot eat sugar ever again. Like, that's just the way I look at it. It's
so revelatory when you put 2 and 2 together and you figure out things, and it's like you certainly figured something out. So Cyrus has a really cool comment. It says, Mike is maybe the most articulate guy I've ever heard in the zero low carb universe. So Mike, it begs the question, when are you going to start your own podcast? I know you've been on my bud Keto Savage's podcast. couple others, and you're on here today. When are you going to start the Carnivore Addiction podcast?
That's a pretty good question. Thank you. Is that Desert Cyrus? Is that he said that?
Called the gentle push from a longtime podcaster trying to get you. You are very well spoken, and I know people have enjoyed hearing your story here today. Guys, go follow him. zerocarb.roofer. So you're a grandpa of 4 and you're up on roofs fixing people's roofs. Is that what you do?
I don't fix them. I just sell the roofs. I get up there on the ones that aren't very steep. I have a limit of how steep I'm going to go.
Oh, I've seen some of those guys on those fancy schmancy houses, the big 3-story houses, and the really sharp roof. I'm like,
yeah, there's no way I'll do that.
Money in the world.
I always tell my customers, I'd rather live to see tomorrow. I'm not getting up there. My guys do that. There's some of them that I don't watch them do. I can't do it. It stresses me out way too much when they're on those really tall roofs. But yeah.
But Mike, seriously, consider that. And if I can do anything to help you, podcasting, I think, could be pretty powerful for you. Or do you have any other aspirations with your story? It's pretty remarkable, like a book, anything other than just having an online social media presence?
I've thought about both podcasts and also a book. I think I get pretty passionate, much like you, obviously. I get pretty passionate about if people just recognize that their addiction that they have towards sugar or food or whatever, because I see this so many times. I know you have to see it too on Facebook groups and things where people, even keto groups, they're like, oh man, I fell off the wagon. I mean, they talk about it like it's addiction, but no, you've got to be careful, man. You can't, some of those keto treats, stuff like that, it's going to knock you off. It's going to create cravings and you're going to binge and it's uncontrollable. So yeah, I've become pretty passionate about the addiction side of it for sure.
Which is the beauty of carnivore, by the way. When you eat only animal foods, there is no treats to tempt you with there are in keto. So although I do think you can eat a well-formulated ketogenic diet with mostly real whole foods, very successful, unless you're sensitive to the oxalates, and we could get into that in a whole start your podcast. I'll come on as one of your first guests and we can talk about some of those things.
Awesome. That's awesome, man.
How's that motivation, brother?
I love it.
So Mike, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jimmy. Seriously, it's awesome.
Get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com. Woo!
Have you experienced the dreaded keto flu? Did you know that most of these symptoms are actually due to your body dumping excess electrolytes? This is where Element comes in. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt with no sugar. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited to folks following a keto, low carb, or paleo diet. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium, with none of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. Everyone needs electrolytes, especially those on low-carb diets, or if you practice intermittent or extended fasting, if you're physically active, or sweat a lot. Add Element today and see how much better you feel and perform. Use the URL drinklmnt.com/Jimmy.